Okay. Right, picking up where we left off yesterday, then we'd gone through the bulk of the stuff on evolution that I need to, and we'd got the sort of mechanism of natural selection being the driving force. Really, we start off with variation as a result of genetic mutations more than anything else. We then have these selection processes, and we had the three different forms. Directional and stabilizing are the ones that you need for the exam. We also had the disruptive, diversifying one that can go as far as splitting a group into two new species completely. So yeah, we then had a look at some of the evidence for evolution, the idea of looking at distribution of organisms, fossils, carbon dating, comparing anatomy, the embryology side of it, and also this bit on the comparative physiology and biochemistry, just looking at DNA sequences or looking at immunology type responses, that sort of thing. So that leads us on to looking at a few examples. And the thing is with this, of course, you can get people saying, oh, we don't believe in evolution. And America is actually quite like that, isn't it? There are parts of America where their biology textbooks cannot have evolution in them. They cannot teach evolution. And I think it's something in the order of 40-something% of Americans do not believe in the evolution of man. And it really is quite, interesting, shall we say, at the risk of being rude. But, their religious beliefs are so strong that, they don't accept evolution in the full sense. They haven't managed to knit it together at all. So yeah, you have actually got states in America where textbooks don't have evolution in, and you're not allowed to teach it, that sort of thing. And that is despite, but I think it is more the human side of it. Everything else might have evolved to where it is now, but humans are special, I think, is the sort of overriding sort of attitude. But you can demonstrate examples of evolution on quite short timescales. I mean, a lot of evolution, we're talking about millions of years, aren't we? To get from, our sort of ape ancestors to where we are now, we are talking huge periods of time. But we've got examples of evolution, of natural selection within our lifetimes. And these examples on this slide are just that. So, you can't argue that these are not evolution. Well, I guess you can, but, they quite obviously are. The first one, antibiotic-resistant bacteria, so things like MRSA, Clostridium difficile, and loads more now, are being selected by the fact that we put antibiotics into their environment. Certain mutations enable the bacteria to survive. As I was saying yesterday, you've got the ones that produce the beta-lactamase enzyme that can break down the beta-lactam ring in a penicillin molecule. There's loads of others, and you've only got to have these being selected several times over, and you get these whole populations of resistant organisms. Well, they haven't necessarily been classified as a new species at this point, but that's the ultimate sort of outcome, isn't it? That they become so different that they are something else. And it's down to mutations and selection, which is what, the evolutionary process is. The second one on here, warfarin-resistant rats. Well, warfarin is a substance that stops the blood from clotting. And warfarin has been used as a rat poison for years and years and years. And the rats who were tolerant of it or managed to break it down obviously survived, passed that on, and we now have warfarin-resistant rats. So that is not particularly useful as a rat poison now, and other substances have to be used. Warfarin is also given to human beings. In what scenario? Yeah, close. If it's to do with blood clotting. So if somebody's had a stroke because of a blood clot, or if they've had a stent implanted in the heart, it does increase the risk of blood clots. Or somebody might have a history of thrombosis, might have had a coronary thrombosis, you know, as a heart attack, that sort of thing. Because it reduces clotting, it's given to people, but it has to be used very, very carefully, because obviously then if they cut themselves, they're likely to bleed more. And yeah, warfarin, it seems like a fairly sort of basic sort of treatment, but you know, anything that prevents blood clotting in people who are at risk is worthwhile. I always think this one looks funny. The third one down: heavy metal tolerant plants. Now, yeah, if when my two sons were at home, they played a lot of heavy metal music in their bedrooms. But what I'm talking about actually is areas where you get mining. So you could have, let's say, a lead mine or something like that, where a lot of earth is being brought from deep underground with the metal in it, but not enough metal to extract. I've actually no idea how they mine for lead. But things like tin and copper and stuff like that, I'm trying to think what we'd associate with this country. Tin mines in Cornwall, I think, isn't it? And what you end up with very often is what you call a spoil heap, where you just get all the stuff that's been dug out before you get to the good source of the metal. You bring out a lot of, yeah, sort of low level, but it, you know, it does still contain the metal, but at low levels. And to most plants this would be toxic, but you then get the odd tolerant ones will grow on the spoil heaps. And of course they've got no competition, so they thrive. And you know, they can pass their genes on. You get more and more of these. And actually there are species of plants, and I can't remember what, that can actually be used to clean up areas from mining. They will actually take up the heavy metals, and you know, you've cleaned the soil with them. But yeah, normally metals are, you know, quite toxic to most living things. Sickle cell anemia is an interesting one, because that is selected. No, sorry, sickle cell anemia is not selected. Well, I suppose it is actually. Sickle cell trait is selected in areas where you've got high incidence of malaria. Reason being that actually of the two, malaria is the one that's more likely to kill you. Sickle cell trait tends not to be lethal. Full-blown sickle cell anemia would be if it's a homozygous condition, but if you've just got the heterozygous, that can protect you. So there's a sort of selection going on there. And then the good old classic peppered moth, good old Biston betullaria. I think I was saying to my husband, it must have been at the weekend. I thought, oh, what? I'm just sort of running through things I'm doing this week. I said, oh, right, we've got evolution, natural selection. And he said, Biston betullaria. And that had just come back from school. You know, it's one of those things that sort of sticks in your head, because we used to study it in quite a lot of detail. And it appears on the GCSE. So I don't know if those are the same images I used last year in the GCSE, possibly. But how many moths can you see? How many can you easily see? Well, yeah, you can see 3. You can easily see 2, can't you? But there are actually 4. It takes me a while to find the one on here. It's there. The way I have to do it is to find that bit, the head end, yeah, and then work backwards. And on this one, of course, you've got the dark one, or what they call, whoops, I wobbled out of it. That one stands out a little more because you've got light catching it, some of the edges, so it shows up a bit lighter. But this is one species of moth, Biston betullaria, and it comes in these 2 varieties. The peppered variety, you know, the light with dark speckles, and the dark one is described as the melanic form. All right, so this one is the melanic, as in melanin, the dark colour that, you know, colours hair and eyes, and you know, it's the same thing in other animals as well. So that's the melanic form, and that's the light or peppered form. And the story goes that in the mid-1800s, as we always keep going back to, and you've got the Industrial Revolution, the original distribution of genotypes was such that the peppered variety of this moth was far more common than the dark one. Because when they landed on the bark of trees, well, which one of those two is going to get eaten? Well, as long as the pale one hasn't actually got a red line round it like that, then the black one stands out more. And so the black ones are going to get picked off. So the survival is going to be much better for the light-coloured ones. So there are far more of those. Because they survive, they pass on their genes, and there you go. However, come the Industrial Revolution, we get a lot of soot and dirt in the air from factories, you know, because in those days, you know, there was no sort of filtering and cleaning of factory emissions. And so the story has it, the bark of trees became much darker with all the pollution deposits on. And as a result, the darker moths were actually favoured in terms of survival, and the light ones were picked off by the birds and eaten. Now, whether it was actually recorded at the time, I'm not entirely clear on this, but a piece of research to try and recreate this was carried out by a guy called Kettlewell, which I think was in the 1960s. And he sort of set up this, you know, controlled area to study the effects of predation on different coloured backgrounds. But there was some debate as to the validity of his research because, well, one story has it that these moths don't actually land on trees anyway. So, you know, he was sort of forcing them to land on trees because that's all there was. But it wasn't actually clear. But I think, you know, the outcome would be fairly predictable. And I don't think there was anything really wrong with his research. But, you know, the peppered moth still remains our, you know, our go-to example of natural selection, really. I would have thought so. Yes, I've never seen any data actually. It'd be something worth having a look for. You know, current data on the peppered moth. But yes, we're only ever given that snapshot of information, but no other data as the years have gone on. Because obviously, you then have the Clean Air Act, and so you know, factories were cleaning up their emissions, and you know, people stopped burning so much coal, and the air has got a lot cleaner, so we shouldn't now be seeing trees with large deposits of soot on. They've probably over time all got eaten and there aren't any left or something like that. You know, I'll have a look, see if I can find any data on that. So we've got examples of natural selection, you know, within our lifetimes, really, is what this is about. And the fact that, you know, because we can see it happening, you know, we can understand the mechanisms more easily because it's, you know, it's actually visible. We can actually make measurements. We can count these things. And, yeah, it gives us a bit more support for our understanding. Okay, so the ultimate destination, I suppose, of any groups that have got separated from each other, you know, possibly like this. I mean, you could have an environment where there were light areas and dark areas, and in the light areas your light moths would be favoured, in the darker areas the dark ones would be favoured, and you could ultimately end up with those two becoming completely separated, so that only light ones lived in the light areas, only dark ones in the dark areas, a bit like that diversifying selection. And if this goes on for long enough and they don't interbreed because of, you know, they are perhaps separated from other reasons, then yes, you get two different species. So that's the next thing, is to consider, you know, how can we actually get new species? Because quite clearly, you know, we have over time. The first thing that we need is an isolating mechanism. Now, isolating mechanisms are, well, they're quite broad, really. They can be physical features, and it can come down further down here. You'll see geographical options. I'll talk about those when I get there. Or they can be biological things. They can be behavioural or something like that. But anything that prevents interbreeding between two groups. So what you end up with are separate groups then that then adapt. You know, well, adaptive radiation, you know, it just means they spread out in their area adapt to that particular environment, and then maybe never encounter the other group ever again, and change sufficiently that they couldn't then interbreed if you bring them back together again. And we have this definition of a species: group of organisms capable of interbreeding and producing fertile offspring. Now, it's an important definition, but it's not the only definition of a species. You can also define species in terms of niche. Have you used the word niche in environment? That a species can be defined by its niche, which is just everything, isn't it, about it, where it lives, what it feeds on, when it breeds, all those sort of things about it. So you know, one species, one niche, basically. But part of that niche, I guess, is the fact that it only breeds with other members of its, you know, same type. So, yeah, examples. Well, we have, it's easiest to look at this from the sort of point of view of what happens if you try and interbreed two species. What do you get? Well, you get a sort of hybrid, don't you? Some of which we might be familiar with. So, for example, what do you get if you breed? Oh, this is like, it's like, oh yeah. What happens is if you breed together a female horse and a male donkey. I have now got this the right way around. And it's an animal that we hear the name of. That's the mule. All right, a mule. Yeah. A mule is a female horse and a male donkey, and I've only just got that clear in my head as of, I can't remember, yesterday evening. I think I just happened to be reading something, and it was just describing somebody, and about this woman. It said, and her mare had just given birth to twin mules. Right, that's now going to stick in my head. That little phrase will remind me that if the mother is the horse, then you get mules, because if the father's a horse and the mother's a donkey, you actually get something different called a hinny. Now, mules are very, very tough. They've got the sort of size and strength of a horse, but the toughness of donkeys. A hinny, I think, is a smaller animal that combines more of the sort of less strong and tough aspects. But a mule is, it's an animal we sort of, you know, we mention the name, don't we? All right, well, do you need to see a picture of one? I'll show you. Yeah, mules are infertile. The reason being that one, and this I can't commit to memory, one of the parents has 64 chromosomes, the other has 62. So a mule has 63 chromosomes, so it's not able to make gametes. You know, it can't go through meiosis because you can't pair the chromosomes up and get, you know, single sets going into eggs or sperm, because, you know, you've got a bit of an issue with the pairing. I seem to have this set very large. Oh, let's just get a giant mule up. So that's going to sound very odd on the recording. I do apologise. Okay, I will have to shrink it down. I just can't. 200? What would I have it that big for? Oh, let's have it a bit smaller. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That. Yeah. You have to sort of separate them out. So you've got. Yeah. That is a mule. Yeah. That is a donkey. All right. You've got. That looks like that might be quite useful, doesn't it? Oh, there's quite a lot of these, so let's have a look at that. But you've got, yeah. So you can breed together a horse and a donkey, and you get the mule. So, yeah. And there's features there that are both, yeah? So this is actually really quite useful. So the horse with a big mane and tail, but a curve to the back, large hooves. The donkey with a much less mane, a line down its back, this dorsal line. This it's like a hair that sticks up, isn't it, down the back? Short tail, but you get the slightly curved back in a mule, but you can see the mane is somewhere in between. You know, it's not bushy, but it's not just a little bit, and you know, there's a lot of in-betweeniness there. And you'd look at that and you'd think, is that a horse or is that a donkey? Not entirely sure. But you can't breed those together. The only way you can get a mule is to breed together a horse and a donkey. So you can't breed more mules. You do, however, have some other, I've now got to go down this route, haven't I? There are some other rather more unusual examples that we're much less familiar with, such as, that's the ones. There's ligers and tigons. I'll put them both in, see what we get. Yeah. All right. Yeah. On the left here we have a liger. The size of that thing. And a tigon on the other side, much smaller. Now, a liger is what you get if the mother is a tiger. All right, and the tigon is what you get if the mother is a lion. Now, this one I can remember because I've read the reasoning behind it, and it's because of the way the mother's body is adapted to develop a number of offspring. Now, a female tiger normally only produces 1 or 2 cubs. Yeah, so her resources all go into 1 or 2 cubs, and they're bigger. All right, so this will be female tiger will have produced this, whereas female lions produce far more cubs, don't they? You know, perhaps 4 or 5, something like that. So they're good at giving their resources to several smaller offspring. So that will be from the female lion. Okay, so yeah, you can theoretically, you can't breed these with each other. You can't breed 2 ligers or 2 tigons. And I don't think you can breed a liger and a tigon together, but you can backbreed them with another. So, for example, you can have a liger. If you breed a lion with a liger, or a tigon, or a that sort of thing. So you know you can make some rather curious results, but they of course don't benefit from that. And I think it's in America they're really trying to clamp down on the production of these sort of hybrids, just as sort of tourist attractions in zoos. No, the problem is, you know, you can really start introducing some very undesirable features. Other things, you can, I think, breed a zebra and a horse. The Zorse. Yeah, I've got to think of all the ones that come off the GCSE, but yeah, there's Zorses. Seem to come in 2 different sort of varieties. You can get the sort of, you know, all one colour but with stripes, but you also get this rather sort of, you know, it looks a bit like with cars they call them cut and shut, where if, you know, and it's a dodgy thing, if 2 cars have been wrecked, you could take good bits from both of them and stick them together, and it's obviously very dangerous, but it looks like it's been built out of different animals. I believe you can do zebra and donkey, in which case you would get a zonkey. Yeah? Yes, and we all want one. All right, but they, you know, they've got enough chromosomes in common to, and then it gets ridiculous. Oh, the other option, rather than a zonkey, a zedonk. But then you have, yes, what you can't breed together. I've never seen that. That's wonderful, isn't it? A zebra and an elephant. It is not going to happen because they are not closely enough related. So, you know, lions and tigers are. They're both from a big cat family. Zebras, donkeys, horses, all from the same family. But yeah, that's just not going to happen. So yeah, you get some. I don't think you get the nearest thing. I just say elephant hybrid. The nearest you'd get to that is if they do actually manage to bring mammoths back, because you'd have to have some involvement probably of an elephant. So you might get something that's mostly mammoth, but not quite all mammoth, because you probably have to fill in the gaps, sort of thing. So yeah, right, okay, we've a little bit sidetracked, but it's still useful, isn't it? So definition of species then, group of organisms that are capable of interbreeding and producing fertile offspring. So a mule isn't a species. Ligers and tigons and zorsas, they're not species, they are hybrids, all right? You can't make any more from them. Well, I say you can't make any more from them. You can't breed them sexually. Theoretically, you could clone them. So yeah, you could. You see, take a body cell from a mule, take its nucleus out, implant that into an emptied egg cell from another, I don't know, horse probably, put that in, zap it, let it divide up to, say, 8 cells, then separate them all out, and you could implant those and get 8 mules from it, identical ones. However, you know, we can follow the possibilities of technology, can't we? Till we get to something ridiculous. All right, what we're looking at, though, is the idea of, you know, where we get new species from, and how are we going to separate organisms, then, to stop them breeding? First of all, you've got what we call allopatric speciation. Now, this occurs as a result of geographical separation, and there's a lot of examples if you want to sort of add bits onto this. Geographical implies just that either they've moved somewhere else. It might be, you know, you might have had a population of animals that relied on a river for water, or a, you know, water hole or something like that. It dries up, so they head off in perhaps 2 or 3 different groups in different directions to find water. They might all go together, of course, but they might not. Equally, of course, you know, they could perhaps come to an area that doesn't have much water because a river has been dry, then the river goes into flood, and you might end up with a group on each side that then might wander off in its own direction. You know, they might sort of give up on joining again and just go off and become groups like that. Or on the large scale, of course, you've got things like well, it's not something we see on a short time scale, but the movement of the tectonic plates on the Earth. The actual surface of the Earth, you know, has moved about over the years. It all used to be one big landmass, and then bits have broken off. And, you know, when you look at a map of the land, you can pretty much see how bits would have fitted together, can't you? But a classic, of course, is Australia. And Australia, and one of the, I think is it Indonesia that's just up from there, one of those islands, and I can't remember what I was watching that had this on, are the only places you find the marsupial animals, the ones that have pouches, yeah? So you only find them on Australia, New Zealand, I guess, Tasmania, and then you find, yeah, there's marsupials somewhere else, but that would have been part of the landmass. So that sort of separation, you know, it can be movement of land masses, it could be volcanoes, earthquakes, floods, you know, anything like that at all. And so we end up with groups that are separated and can't physically get back together again, and so they head off in their own direction. And the camels and llamas are a good example of that, having originated in Asia, I think. I don't know what the reason would have been, but 2 groups set off. The camels went sort of across Asia into Africa. The llamas, however, went north, and they crossed between, when there was land between Russia and North America, and they crossed the land bridge that was there then, made their way down America, and you now only find them in South America, whereas you find camels elsewhere. But, you know, you go back, they've got a common ancestor. So this idea of geographical separation, you know, it could be quite minor things. It could be perhaps, I don't know, a rock fall that blocks off a pass, you know, through some mountains or something like that, or all sorts of things. So allopatric, the patric bit means country, if you think about it. I'm trying to think of a good... patriotic is the word I want, isn't it? Yeah, so patric is to do with country. So allopatric means different countries, really. Sympatric, sim as in sympathy, together sort of feeling. So in the same country, sympatric. This is mechanisms where you've got the animals or plants or whatever still living in the same area. They're in the same country, but something changes. It'll usually be perhaps a genetic mutation or that results in a different behaviour. It might result in a different size. You could get a sort of mismatch in size of reproductive parts, perhaps, so that it just becomes impossible for two animals to interbreed. But more likely it's going to be behaviours like courtship behaviours. And talking about Alfred Russel Wallace yesterday and the birds of paradise and their incredible feather displays, that all of a sudden, you get one bird that produces bright yellow feathers and it manages to hang upside down on a branch to show them off or something like that. Well, that's different, isn't it? And it's so different that, one female bird might think, yeah, I like that. And, they go off and produce offspring that can also produce yellow feathers and hang upside down on a branch, whereas the rest of them are sort of standing around thinking, well, I wonder how he did that. But they then perhaps go down a different route. Or with plants, you might all of a sudden have a mutation in a plant so that it flowers in May instead of August. Well, if the rest of its buddies flower in August, it's not going to be able to breed with those. So as long as it can self-pollinate, it will produce more of its own like. And so you get that sort of thing happening, and you end up with different species because obviously they. If they've got different flowering times, they can't interbreed. That's just not possible. So the idea of isolating mechanisms is really quite critical in speciation. Now the next thing then is once we've got species, we need to organise them. Oh, because we have to organise everything, don't we? But it helps. We are organised individuals as human beings, and so if you walk into Asda, you know where you're expecting to find certain things, don't you? And isn't it horrific when they change things round? Yeah. It's there are various reasons. I mean, sometimes it is just for to make it more efficient. But it's also so that people see things in a different order. Now, for me, that's actually counterproductive because my mind is so obsessive-compulsive that if it's not in the order I'm expecting, I miss things. And I hate it in Asda now, where the way we go in, we have to follow the same route every time. We go in, we turn to the left, we go through, we miss out the clothes because we don't bother with them. But we go around the toiletries, we go around the household stuff, we go across the top, and then we go down the first aisle of the food. Now, I can't remember what it used to be now, but it's now fresh meat. Now, you might think to yourself, actually, that's not a bad place to start because it helps you plan your meals from from that point of view. Perhaps, well, what should we have? Should we have chops? Should we have mince? Should we have this? And then we go into the vegetables. But there was something else there. And now when I come around that corner, I think, oh no, I've got to think about meat now. And I'm not ready to, and still I can't get it. So the organisation, it just, yeah. Oh, they are? Yeah, cheese and butter are, separated, aren't they? And it's, things and cream. Cheese, butter and cream, separate. Weird, yeah. That's the thing, yes. But actually what I tend to do is give up and go somewhere else. I'll come out having thought, well, I couldn't find such and such, or I forgot it because it wasn't on my normal route, so I'll have to pop to Morrison's or something. However, what I'm talking about is organisation. Similarly, of course, you had an assignment in your study skills about using the Dewey Decimal System in the library. And I have to admit, if you walked into Asda and, it was just randomly sort of, T-shirts, potatoes, baked beans, meat, pants, in no order at all, it would be awful. It really would be worse. So, I'm grateful at least they do organise it. And if you walked into a library and there was no order to the books at all, you know, you'd got fiction mixed up with non-fiction and it wasn't in any order, you wouldn't be able to find anything. So we have this obsession, this need to classify. And so we do it with living organisms as well. And what you're going to do to start with is a little activity where we have some little cards with names of organisms on. And you are going to organize them. You're going to classify them. Do not use any sort of standard classification system you are aware of. I do not want some of these organized into animals, some into plants, some into microorganisms. I want you to be creative because I want you to see that this system is entirely arbitrary. At its heart, you know, somebody somewhere has decided that we will classify like this, that we will put these organisms into groups according to, well, someone decides. So you're going to have a go at that. So I shall put this on pause temporarily. Okay, if we have a look then at the standard system for classifying, what we are looking at is not just one set of groups, you know, not just dividing them up like you did into 4 or into 10, but actually using what we'd call a hierarchy, where you have some big groups, but then within the big groups you make smaller groups, and in the smaller groups you have even smaller groups, and so it goes on until you get to a species which is, well, theoretically, your smallest group. Now, this is the sequence. I'm not too bothered about you remembering the one at the top. The idea of domain, this is, as I've said there, a relatively recent idea. And there are 3 domains that I'm aware of, but this changes. Oh, does this change? You have the archaea, which are really primitive cells that aren't really even up to bacterial standard. You then have the bacteria, which we'd call prokaryotes, but the archaea are prokaryotes as well. And then the eukaryotes, which are the, you know, the rest. That is not a particularly useful classification, but you might just see it, so I thought I ought to include it. I've put the initial letters on this slide in red for a reason, which we'll come on to in a minute, because you need to remember the sequence. The next level is kingdom. Now, these are the ones that we're most familiar with, and when I first started learning biology, which is a long time ago, there were 2. We literally just had animals and plants. And everything was fitted into one of those. That's how long ago I started biology, you see. I mean, we're talking, yeah, I'm not even going to try and work it out. But now, well, I suppose as I moved through my education, as we got to A-level biology, we had 3 kingdoms. We had animals, plants, and bacteria. They did at least pull the prokaryotes out of the plant kingdom. By the time I got to university, we had 4. We had plants, animals, bacteria, fungi. When I started teaching, some years ago now, then we were up to 5. We had plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, and then a weird group called the Protista, or the Protoctista sometimes, which was really, we often called it a dustbin group, because they were organisms that had been taken out of the other kingdoms. Well, they were all eukaryotes, but they'd been taken out and just put together, but they didn't really have anything in common apart from being eukaryotes that didn't fit. So, yeah, they didn't go anywhere. But there are now anything up to 8 kingdoms, and it's actually been fairly stable at 8. Now, let's see if the link works on this. Show you this thing, the Catalogue of Life. This is an up-to-date, you can see how up-to-date it is, indexing the world's known species. Now, if we look at the taxonomic tree in here, and this is purely alphabetical. Oh, this was why I had the size increased. Let's just up that so you can see it a bit better. These are the 8 kingdoms that are identified by this organisation, not necessarily every organisation. You have the animals, you have these very primitive bacteria separated from the bacteria themselves, so we now don't have a group called the prokaryotes. We have the Chromista, they're a new group relatively, and they are what we would have called the algae. They used to be in with the plants, then they came out of the plants and went into this group called the Protista, but they've now got a group of their own. And the chrome bit there means colour, chromo means colour. And so if you think about the algae, they can be green, they can be brown, they can be red, they can be orange, so, you know, coloured leafy things. But they don't have proper roots, so they're not classified as plants. So the Chromista have their own little group. Then you have the fungi, the plants, protozoa, which the zoa bit means animals. So these are incredibly simple animals. They are single-celled animals, basically. But they're not animals, otherwise they'd be in the animal kingdom. But they are single-celled, so things like the amoeba that you had on the card there. And then viruses get a kingdom. So this is very thorough. And if you then start to delve into this, well, actually, I'm going to go back to the side, and then I'll come back to this again. Now it's on the board, I can keep coming back to it. Let's see, that should be that one, shouldn't it? Right. So 8 kingdoms we could have, but you will find all sorts of different varieties of this. Very often they only list 6, but yeah, different numbers. If you then take the kingdoms, you can divide them up into phyla, is the plural of that. Although I think with plants they use divisions rather than phylum, but phylum is fine. Within the animal kingdom, for example, there are 35 roughly. One of those is the chordates, or what we would call vertebrates, animals with a spinal cord. All right, now it doesn't just mean a backbone, because you can have a spinal cord without a backbone. Arthropods, the ones with the jointed limbs, the insects and all that lot, and mollusks, for example. So yeah, these are all separate phyla within the animal kingdom. You then take the phylum and you break it down into classes. So in the chordates, for example, we've got a class called Mammalia, the mammals. Under that, you have orders. So for example, primates, you can see where this is going, obviously. Orders are divided into families. Within families, there are, well, they're called genera, is the plural. Single is a genus, and then genera would be plural. And then within each genus, you have a number of different species. Now, you'll see I've written species with a small s as opposed to the others being capital. Reason is that when you write a Latin name, those are the 2 bits that you use. They are genus and species. Genus is written uppercase and species with lowercase. They're always written in italics if you type them. If you write them by hand, you underline. So that is the hierarchy of the taxa, or the taxonomic ranks. So you've got fewest here, and then each group gets fewer, and you've got fewest divisions, or fewest groups in the top one, each one having the most organisms, and then as you progress down, you get fewer and fewer organisms in each one. Now if we go back to that catalogue of life and have a bit more of a look, it would do, wouldn't it? Browse the tree. Okay. Let's try and track ourselves down. Well, if you open up the animals, you'll find, yeah, there's quite a lot of phyla in there. It really puts us in our place, doesn't it? There's all this lot. These are all big groups. There's the mollusks. There's most of these I couldn't tell you what of which. Echinoderms are is that starfish and sea urchins, or is it just sea urchins? Can't remember. But there's all sorts in there anyway. So let's open up the chordates. And even within what we used to call the vertebrates, and we would have said there were 5 groups of vertebrates. We'd say we got fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals. No, within the animals that have a spinal cord, you've got a lot of others. You can see the amphibians are there, the birds are here. There are then 2 groups of fish. You've got the elasmobranchii, are the cartilaginous fish, and there should be another bunch. I can't remember which ones are the other fish. Oh, never mind. Doesn't matter. You have cartilaginous fish and you have bony fish, and I can't think what the bony fish are called. It's completely left me. If we go to our mammals and open up, you've then got no end of different groups of mammals. The carnivores are there. Cetacea is the whales and dolphins. You've got to be seriously into this sort of thing to know them all, obviously. Lagomorphs are rabbits and hares. Where are we? I forgot what I'm looking for. Primates, there we are. Rodents are there. Right, let's open up the primates. Now, here we've got some superfamilies and some families. So let's go to the superfamily Hominoidae. Hominoidea. Within that, we then are in the family Hominidae. Within that, there are then 4 genera. And you can see ours. So what are the others? Well, it's fairly obvious. Gorilla. Okay, guess what that is? So what's the genus Pan? What's in that? Funny, nobody gets this. It's part of the name of the group, or the animal. What are we most closely related to? Yeah, chimpanzee. Yeah, chimpanzee. And Pongo, I think, is the orangutans, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, if you open up the that group, yeah, we're the only ones about at the moment. I'm not sure what happens if you then click on that. I don't think you get any pictures or anything, but you get, yeah, you get the sort of I was going to say historical sort of, you know, origins of us, the different extinct species of this particular genus. And yeah, so there's a lot of information on there, and that's actually, you know, you can play around on that site for ages if you're interested, and you do get it in other languages as well. So right, let's go back to our list. We've got then this sequence, ignore domain, but we've got kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Now you need a way of remembering that. The best way, because most of the words are not difficult. Kingdom is easy, class, order, family are easy, phylum, genus, species, well, species you're familiar with. You've not got a lot of new words to learn there, but you need to get them in the right order. So you just need a mnemonic. And the one I've used for years and years and years and years is King Philip can only find green socks. Sorry, let's try that again. King Philip can only find green socks. Gives you the letters for the beginning of the words. Somebody yesterday had a much ruder one. Given the fact that there's a P there, there's an F there, you can make it into anything you like. But King Philip can only find green socks. Because of the structure of English as a language, you can't put those words together in any other order and have it flow. You know, you couldn't say, King only can Philip green socks find. You know, it just doesn't work. So King Philip can only find green socks works. And that's what I will need you to be able to reproduce in terms of you know, answering a question, is just being able to fill in the right sequence. Now, if you look at particular examples, then we've got this one. We'd only got 6 kingdoms. I couldn't find one with a full 8. We're missing viruses, and we are missing the Chromista, and we've got the Protista here, which lumps together quite a lot. Oh, that's taking the Protozoa as well. Well, it would do, wouldn't it, for 6? But you've got the similarities in each group, of course, are what put them in there, but they're also then the differences with the other groups. So yeah, instead of Protista, we would have Protozoa and Chromista, and then we'd add the viruses as well. I think that works. Take 1 out and add 3, yeah. In terms of the naming, then you've got, yeah, binomial nomenclature is a bit weird because it's got the nom bit in it twice, which means name. It means two-name naming. All right, so two-name naming we can trace back to Carl Linnaeus. So we talk about Linnaean classification, and this is where you put the genus and species together to make the name. So it's always genus first, then species. It does get a bit messed up sometimes when you get varieties or subspecies and things like that. Sometimes some organisms will have 3 names because you'll have a subspecies. You find it, I'm trying to think, one of the examples is in one of those healthy bacterial drinks where there is a bacterium that's got its own double name, but then because they've got made a particular variety of it for that one, possibly it's either Yakult or one of the others, where so lactobacillus something or other, and then something or other else. There's a third name which sort of defines it as being theirs, really. But you have, these 2 names are genus species each time. So Ursus arctos would be the brown bear, Ursus maritimus would be the polar bear. So Ursus is the genus, Arctos and maritimus would be the species. Homo sapiens we're familiar with. And then sometimes you get variations on a theme. So, E. coli is actually Escherichia coli, which is why we call it E. T-Rex we know is Tyrannosaurus rex, isn't it? And then you might sometimes not need to identify the species. So you can just say, some sort of Salmonella species or dog species. Yeah. So you've got, quite a lot of variations, but somewhere you will find genus with an uppercase starter and species lowercase. 3 examples there of classifications using the hierarchy: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So theoretically what I will do in the exam, let's say I said to you that the table below shows the classification of the dandelion, Taraxacum officinale. I've told you its name. So that means I've told you its genus and species. So I could give you a table to fill in and take that out. Because if I've told you its name, then you know that those go in there. And then I could perhaps, I don't know, take a couple of these out because you know that hierarchy. All right? So kingdom, phylum, and then you know it's class, order, family, genus, species. Okay? All right. Well, what that leaves is... Oh, it's not going to do it again. This has let me down twice now. Because I have to do this. I have to do it. Oh, it's because I didn't save it with a thing on its end. Right, now I can do it. Can't I? No, I have to actually show it then. Yeah, that's all right. It's not worth the effort I've now had to make to actually do it.
That's all, folks.
Just pressed the wrong button on that one.